of God's children are for sale.
Hi, Rob Browne here with you on this Wednesday, man. What a day. Got slow Wi-Fi all over the world, I think it is. Dudley, Dawson, hogville.net joins us in the first quarter. Looking forward to hearing what he's got to say. A lot of questions coming in here about the Hogs. What's going on with Rocket Sanders? What's going on with the offensive line in the fourth quarter? Hey, man, that's football. That's why you pay these guys a lot of money to coach, and we'll attack those questions as well. Yancy Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline, checks in with us. No drama at all leading up to the Ole Miss Alabama game Saturday over in Tuscaloosa. That's going to be a fun one. Already questions about who's calling the defensive signals in. That was addressed by Nick Saban. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, but it is kind of fun to talk about it. Hour number 2, Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports, checks in from Athens. Georgia had a little bit of a scare in the first half last Saturday. They came back out in the second half and did what championship teams do. They had 2 straight touchdown drives, drove it down South Carolina's throat, and won 24-14. But, hey, I won because I took Carolina to cover. And in the fourth segment, Chris Lee rivals Vandy, and the Southeastern 14 checks in with us as well. Something to keep in mind, folks, a little housekeeping. The first ever Archbishop J. Peter Sarton Open, the St. Paul Open, will be held October 2nd, Chickasaw Country Club in Memphis. And they have 2 of the $3,000 teams left. 2 of the $3,000 teams left, and 1 of the $1,500 teams left. And they are 4-man shooting teams. You can bring men and women in there. It'll be a lot of fun at the MSSA, Memphis Gun Club out in Arlington. I've been out there a lot. They have 14 stations. It's a great deal. This is for the Clays for Kids, which is supports the Ronald McDonald House across the street from St. Jude Children's Research Hospital in Memphis. 53 rooms. They provide those rooms, the food, everything. Ronald McDonald House. That's what you'll be supporting when you go to the Clays for Kids. Check it out. You can call Chip Greer, 901-482-5680. Go to Clays for Kids. The $3,000 teams, what you get for that are obviously there's 2 4-man shooting teams, reserved golf carts, sponsor thank you on social media with your logo, sponsor logo and website recognized on www.claysforkidsmemphis.com. That is www.claysforkidsmemphis.com. Sponsor logo displayed at dedicated sporting clay stations, ammunition provided, and verbal recognition at tournament. There's also one of those for a $1,500 team for a 4-man team. You also get tremendous recognition and know that you're helping a great cause. Clays for Kids. Call Chip Greer, 901-482-5680. Let's get going, man. In the hog pen, Dudley, Dawson at the ballpark right now, the most beautiful ballpark in America, in the background with him. And Dudley, this is year 4 for Sam Pittman. And let's get your progress report after game 3. We talked about it, and you did, and I did. BYU bringing in all those older guys. It's that same thing with them every year. Arkansas killed them last year up in Provo. This year, they had 62 new players on the team. Hogs have 41 new players. What was the big difference? Besides the
I think the biggest difference is when you have 14 penalties for 125 yards, you're just not going to win a football game against a good football team. That's what BYU isn't a great football team, but it's a good football team. That inconsistency, I'm a big fan of lining up under the center when you're in a short yardage situation. I think Jalen Hurts and Philadelphia have shown the ways that you can get first downs in those situations much better than a shotgun. I do not think it was a great coached game. I do not think it was a great executed game. And I really feel like that they are at a pivotal point in their season that you either got to get a lot better a lot quickly, or you're about to be sitting at 2-5.
Yeah, and I like this one from Earl Thomas Conley. Love these names. Ash Flat, Arkansas. That's where the Walmart is for Hardy. Hogs need to forget last week. I would agree with ETC because the fourth quarter, you looked out there and there was a lot of penalties and all. Just everything was. I can't remember seeing KJ Jefferson. He looked lost, but the whole night it just Arkansas jumped out early, but BYU came back and it was a full 60 fight, Dudley. Now you got to get ready to go to LSU. Based on what we saw in the 11 a.m. beatdown at Mississippi State, I don't know if they're that good. I think Mississippi State is committing malpractice, what they're doing with Will Rogers in that offense. That's just my opinion. KJ is the leader of that team. I believe he is. I think he takes this team down to Baton Rouge and they play a hell of a game.
That may be the case. I do think one thing that has become readily apparent is that he's not 100%. We asked during Monday's press conference if he was injured. Coach Pittman kind of hedged a little bit, said he was unable to do some of the stuff that he normally would. And I think we're talking about things like trucking a guy at the goal line when he could have scored. There's so much culpability to go around. In terms of that loss, as Pittman said, you have half those penalties, you go ahead and win the football game. You might even have tied it on that last drive when it was just, readily apparent that they couldn't hold BYU's defensive line off. It is this offensive line, and I'm the first to admit it. I said earlier this year, I thought that it had a higher ceiling. That certainly they had inexperience, but had a higher ceiling. I'm beginning to change my mind on that. This is not an offense that has gotten much push. Everybody says, well, Coach Pittman's an offensive line guru, and he is. He's proven that over the years. I'm sure that they're going to make some tweaks and do some things that they can to try to get this better. You've got to have a healthy football team. You've got to have an executing football team, or you're going to see the situations that you did last weekend. And I think the biggest thing is the effort was there, I think, but it just wasn't there technical-wise and execution-wise. And I think that's probably the most disappointing thing for fans, that in 4 years you're still you're having these things popping up. And I think it's caused a lot of consternation this week. And it's not a happy fan base. It's not a happy coaching staff. Certainly not a happy football team. And as I said earlier, going on this stretch they're about to go on now, especially these next 2 weeks, by going to Baton Rouge and going to down to Arlington to play Texas A&M, those are two pretty good football teams. As you said, I don't know if LSU is as good as they looked last week, but I think they're better than they looked in the second half against Florida State.
Yeah, fan base is just. I like the new Dr. Pepper commercial with Brian Bosworth and everybody, and they're throwing popcorn and screaming and breaking stuff. And he goes, "Hey, everybody, it's just the first play." I mean, people do tend to, react, but it is frustrating. I mean, watching the game, and this is a comment here. Chris Saxon, of course, his nephew, Patrick Kudus is right tackle for the Hogs. Question for Dudley: did it look like Brady Latham was targeted by the refs? I watched the game, and two of those penalties looked questionable to me. BYU won and was the better team last Saturday evening up at Reynolds Razorback Stadium.
I see it as a matter of I don't know that he was targeted. I see it as a matter just like in baseball. If you're a pitcher like Greg Maddux and you throw strikes all night long and you get off the plate a little bit as you go along, the umpires are going to go ahead and call it. If you're an offensive lineman in college football and you get a couple of calls early that were legitimate, then I think you're going to, they're going to look at you. And if there's a question on whether you did hold or not, they're probably going to call a holding penalty. So I think he put himself in that position. Do I think all four were great calls? No. Do I think that the excessive celebration penalty was ridiculous? Yes. I mean, Coach Pittman said that the referee told him that the players were going up in the stands. That's ridiculous. You can see on the video, all they did was dance and celebrate. And that's kind of okay to do if you don't target the other team. So So do I think he was, targeted by the refs? No, but I think that he put himself in that position to not get the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I think they had to move him from his normal position to another position late in the game. And I know he's a senior, but is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, when you start moving people around in a heated game, and they're all heated at this level, that causes. There was a lot of movement around there, and I saw Patrick Kudis at one time. I mean, those guys. He looked like he was standing up in a boxing match. There was a guy on either side of him. Give people. You're down there at field level a lot. That you're banging heads out there for 3 hours or whatever it is. It is brutal. Absolutely looked at that game, and I said the same thing. Sam Pittman is regarded like Nick Saban with defense, Kirby Smart with defense, that type of offensive line coach. How deep is the offensive line roster? Because as you get into these SEC games, guys get banged up, and you need to rotate people. How comfortable are they with the twos?
Well, they have plenty of options. How comfortable are they with the two? I don't think that comfortable, because they're not right now. They're not as comfortable with the ones. You're gonna put a lot of work in this week. You're going to find a game plan that you hope can succeed against LSU. But my goodness, LSU has some defenders that can come at you. There would be an easier transition this week if they were playing somebody else. I'm sure they're over there and doing everything they can. I think that as hard as the fan base took the loss, the players and the coaches take it as hard, if not harder. So I know that this is not something they want. I mean, they are under siege over there right now from the fan base overall, because of the way it happened. Not that they lost. I think if it was just a loss, the fan base would say, okay, well, that was just a bad game or something. But I think that they look right now, some people in the fan base, a large segment to me, and look and says there are some areas that can they get them changed around? And I don't know that you can answer that for sure right now. Again, I'm not putting the season, over. I'm not saying they're not going to a bowl, but this stretch right here is going to fix. It's gonna be a big factor in that. Like I said, very easily you can go 2-5, and that is not what you would want in year 4.
No, I mean, you're talking about Arkansas stretch Saturday down in Baton Rouge, and then Texas A&M in Arlington, which is supposed to be a neutral site, but there are a ton of Hog fans at that game always. And then Ole Miss in Oxford, and Alabama in Tuscaloosa, and Mississippi State in Fayetteville. That's 5 straight conference games coming up. Then you'll have a week off. Florida in Gainesville, Auburn in Fayetteville, Florida International University in Fayetteville, and Missouri in Fayetteville, November 24th. You're right. It's like a fire, isn't it? When things go bad.
Even if they had won Saturday night, I had them probably going 3-4. If you're just being objective about it during that stretch, overall. But it's unsettling, I think, or disconcerting is a couple of words you might use about the way they performed the other night, when it shouldn't be that way in the 4th year. Even if you lost 3 offensive linemen, you just have to look better than you did the other night. You cannot win, but you got to look better, or the fan base is going to have valid criticisms to get upset.
Yeah, and Dudley, that's the thing about you that I really respect is, you're an Arkansas grad. You were a GA for Eddie Sutton. You were Nolan Richardson. You're from Balch, which is a suburb of Newport. But the main thing is, you know what the hell you're talking about. And I get so many compliments and comments from people. And listen, to people watching on YouTube, I'm trying to learn how this YouTube stuff works. Send in your questions on YouTube. I get tons of them during the show. I hope it doesn't look like I'm not listening to you. I'm trying to transfer these questions up on the screen. There are a ton of them coming in throughout the show, but they say that, Dudley knows Arkansas, but he knows damn football. He gets it. You get the people part of it. Okay. And you're like me. I'm more critical of my alma mater, Auburn University, than I am of any other school. I'm hypercritical of my school. And I don't do that on purpose. It's just that I expect more from my own kids, my own family. That's just the way we are. What you just said about Arkansas is they're in a balance right now. They're hanging in the balance. They go down and get blown out Saturday at LSU. The wheels come off. I mean, we've seen this before. They go down there, come up short, lose 24-23. I don't know how they react from that. Or they go down there and they get a win. How do they react from that? What's the best case scenario short of winning?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the words. I would say that I'd like to think that I'm objective. I'm not an agent of BS. I don't have time to sit around and say everything. I mean, I believe I said this last week, that I don't have time to be Douglas Niederbauer and say everything's okay. My credibility is what, is the thing I've based my career on. So if I'm sitting here saying something, I believe it, and I'm not saying it to say it. I'm not the clickbait dude. I realize that's prevalent in our media, in society these days, or whatever, but I don't have time to be that dude. I got to be who I am. That being said, you go down there and you get roughed up, or as I think that'd be the worst. If you lose 24-23, it would be, painful. But that if you lose 24-23 at Baton Rouge at night on a Saturday night, I would say that would be a vast improvement from what you did this past week, even though you would have scored 30 points or whatever it was.
Yeah. Well, and that's going to be an emotional atmosphere down there. I listened. We had to go up to Clarksville right after the show Saturday. Got to get you to come on these roundtables on Saturdays if you're available, because I know you got to your kids are all older, grown up like mine. I mean, I don't know if they're grown
35,
up.
35, 32, 31, 28.
23, 25, 27, and 34. So, when does the brain fully develop? Ever? Hey, I want to tell you something, though.
Listen, man, the question, the answer to that question is it happens at different times for different kids.
Yeah.
They find out adulting is hard, and they find out in different ways at different ages, I would say.
Yeah. And I think that's what people forget sometimes. Okay, now you're talking about 18 to 23-year-olds. And I say, it's going to take a while to get the virus out of here, because you're still seeing a lot of 6th and 7th year players. And that makes a significant difference. I mean, Dudley Dawson at 18 versus Dudley Dawson at 23. Big difference physically. If you're going in the weight room every day and working out and doing stadiums and stuff, it's just people underestimate it. My son Wilson, we crunch the numbers, and he's in private equity, investment banking, that world. I love crunching these numbers on the bets, analytics, whatever you want to call them, the gazindas. He made a comment last weekend in the middle of all this craziness. He said, with the transfer portal and NIL, Chris Saxon's on a roll this morning down in Fairhope. Sam Hartman is 26 years old. Holy cow. He could go to medical school. He'd already be out of medical school. I mean, think about that. But anyway, I think about it, and I lost my train of thought here because I'm getting kind of overwhelmed.
While you get it, I'll pick up for you here.
Yeah,
this seems like a nice way to segue right now. Andre Sam, who is a 7th year defensive back for LSU, is filling in for Greg Brooks Jr., the former Razorback who's playing at LSU. It's come out this morning. His family has released a statement that he had a surgery last Friday on a brain tumor. I mean, the kid, and I still call him a kid, even though he's been playing college football for a while. He's always been a great statesman, I think, for both of these teams. He's a stand-up young man. Certainly wish him and his family well. There were some hard feelings from a few in the fan base when he transferred to LSU. I didn't mind it at all. That's where he's from.
Yeah.
And he put in a time here where he had 186 tackles over the years, started 32, I think, of the 36 games he played in. And life's too short to hate. And I think we should focus on the young man right now. I'm wishing him and his family the best. I'm not going to do that whole thoughts and prayers thing. I'm just wishing him a speedy recovery in a situation that's much more important than football.
Yeah, I'm with you. You hear people say thoughts and prayers, and I think that one of the best things I ever heard at Mass was Father Sachi at St. Louis Catholic Church in Memphis. He said he's from India, and he said you always hear people praying. They want something specific. It's almost like they're going to the grocery store to get bacon or eggs or milk. It's more the constancy in prayer, and it's what I always say is that, and I absolutely agree with you. And I saw that, and I was going to ask you to say something about it, and. Again, hate is not a virtue that is taught. And when guys leave, I don't like all this leaving and stuff like that. I believe in grinding it out. But sometimes, hey, my first marriage didn't work out. I did everything I could, probably on both sides to make it fail. But, you have to move on. And that's the thing about it. But what my son Wilson was saying was with the portal and all the movement, it makes every weekend now in college football like March Madness opening weekend. And I'm like, you know what? That's pretty damn good for TV, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I sit there before the ball game, before Arkansas game that day, and watch games, and I was thinking, what in the world is going on in this Alabama game? What in the world is going on in this South Carolina game? Why is Missouri rushing the field? A 61-yard field goal, I get that. It's different if they had won and it was a situation where it was just a win at the end of the ball game where they run out of clock and they rush the field. Maybe I'd be a little wary of that. But 61-yard field goal to win a game is a deal. And I don't blame them celebrating, even though our man Eli gets a little crazy at times.
It's
entertaining though, very entertaining.
No, look, it's crazy. I'll tell you one thing. Here it's getting a debate now coming in. Thanks, Franz. NBC said 26 last Saturday. Franz Beard is now saying Sam Hartman's 24. Here's another one. July 29th was his birthday. He's a good Baptist boy playing quarterback for the Catholics. It's a great storyline. Dudley, looking at Arkansas right now, what do you know? Because here's a bunch of questions coming in about the guy from Rockledge, Florida, running back Raheem Rocket Sanders. What do you know? And you and I both, I know we're not doctors, but what do you know about his knee?
Well, if I knew he was practicing, I couldn't tell you. That would be the biggest thing. And people are saying, why do you? Well, that's the reason we get to go to practice. Is there some things that, Coach Pittman will address that, I'm sure, again this morning. It's the way, we like to deal with things around here. You learn more if you're quiet at times. But I'd be surprised if he plays this weekend. They're having a lot of trouble with the swelling in the knee. You hear different things, and I do believe that he'll be better as the year goes along, but I'm not sure he's going to play this weekend. And I know that would be a big disappointment. But here's the thing. It's not time to panic in terms of Rocket Sanders. It is time to panic in terms of the football team, but not times, you can't put him out there and tear up his knee or make it even worse just because you want to win a game this Saturday. You got to think about the Saturdays down the line. Like AJ Green did a really good job on that first drive. I was surprised they didn't go back to him more. And Coach Pittman, even said that he thought that was a mistake and he wanted it to be at 12, 15 touches. I do believe that, as I said, we'll learn more officially from Coach Pittman on the SEC teleconference that's coming up here beginning at 10 o'clock with Brian Kelly. But it's just, I think both the two guys that you thought were the best 1-2 combination in the SEC, or at least a lot of people did, in KJ Jefferson and Rocket Sanders. One of them's not playing, and one of them's clearly not playing to his capability, likely because of the not being 100% healthy.
Yeah, and got another question here from a listener, Artemis Pyle, asking about KJ Jefferson. Seems like he was lost, as I referenced earlier, late in the game. We know Dan Enos can coach quarterbacks, but as a play caller, How comfortable are you with what you've seen in these first 3 games? Because you got 9 more to go, and you should expect a bowl game as well.
I think Dan Enos is a very good coach. He's proven it over the years. I was not impressed with the play calling the other night. I'm just there's a mixture there. I like KJ on the RPOs. I mean, here we are talking about Kendall with 1L Browse. They were all upset about his play calling last year, and now I saw some people wanting to bring him back. What I do think is KJ functions better in RPO situations instead of being a drop back quarterback passer. I know that's more of what they're getting to. We've heard Coach Pittman talk a couple of times about how they've got to figure out what they're really good at and stay with it. And Chris Saxon has pointed out in an earlier comment that they did rush for 180 yards, that they did have some big plays. You also point out that obviously Isaiah Satega was able to take that back. AJ Green, so there were some big plays there. It's the consistency on short yardage. The offensive line, the defensive line, and it went both ways. BYU, even though they're an older team, they have, again, this is not a made up number. They had 90 new players on the roster this year. Arkansas had, 60, excuse me. 60. And
Arkansas had 60 or BYU? I thought Arkansas had like 42.
Arkansas had 38 when it all ended up. BYU had 60 new players.
Yeah, I was going to say 60. So
exactly. It was a different football team than last year, but still, Arkansas should have won that game. They didn't win it because of execution. They didn't win it because of play calling. They had enough points. And I thought the defense played well at times, but secondary may not be as good as I thought it was.
All right. That's what that was tough to watch. The defense, I thought looked good in the first couple of games, but Western Carolina, Kent State, then you go up to BYU. You're right. Completely different team. You had a couple of games worth of tape on them to see what they were doing. And BYU always has good football. I go back to 1979, that 11-0 team from Lavelle Edwards and Brigham Young. I think Jim McMahon was the quarterback. They have been rolling ever since. They won the national championship in 1984 and that thriller 17-10 in the Holiday Bowl in San Diego over Michigan. But they're for real, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we're going to find out a little bit more about them this week because the offense they're playing this week, they're going to Kansas in their first Big 12 conference game of the program. It's weird to say that. It was really weird being in the media room for the BYU last week when they had all the Big 12 shirts on. It's still going to take me a while to get used to that. But they go to Kansas this week. Kansas obviously got a great quarterback, has an offense that can score a lot of points. That's going to be a shootout, I think. Should be fun to watch. That's one of the ones that I'll be watching early on, Saturday.
And looking at college football here, I like this. The Razorbacks, big one coming up, obviously Saturday. So I like the breakdown on that. If you can, stay on with us. Yancy Porter's going to be on. I want to get your thoughts on, Lane Kiffin. I think he's a hell of a coach. There's just the drama and stuff leading up to him and Saban. We can't say everything on this show that or I know that we talk with people in private, but I just think I love what's going on in college football right now. There's a lot of interest. I got to ask you this. Ohio State down kind of like Bama this year. Notre Dame probably has best chance since early 80s to win it all. Would you agree with that, Dudley?
Yes. I do believe that's a statement that's accurate. It's wide open. And, I haven't really looked too much at Notre Dame's schedule, but if it's like it has been, I think they have a wonderful chance. They just always have to get past those service academies. It seems like there's one service academy that gives them trouble, each year.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a break. Be right back. I got another one here for you. Jim McMahon, a Catholic in a sea of Mormons. That's right. I bet you that was wild when he was in college. That's a trip. Okay, take a quick break. We're going to be right back. Yancy Porter, Rebel Yell Hotline will join us. Dudley Dawson, one of the good ones, man. Got a lot. Dudley, I got a ton of questions for you. They're Razorbacks, they're everything. But again, you get the good picture, the big picture. And Steve Phelan, one of our listeners, big Tennessee fan. He's Tim McCarver's cousin. You talk about a Cardinals fan. I need to get the two of y'all together. Mazel tov. We'll be right back.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4-city exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am Ari Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
All right, Rob Browne back here with Yancy Porter and Dudley Dawson. Bring Yancy in here in just a second. Dudley, stay on with us if you can. Love this conversation. We're going to get into the Ole Miss Alabama game and college football in general. But let people know how they can keep up with you, all your great work, and one of the best Twitter handles anywhere around, based strictly on the who it's named after. I love it.
My initials, Dead Sports, DED Sports, not DEAD yet, Sports. It's been interesting. A lot of stuff going on in the sports world. The whole Colorado thing, 9 million people watching last Saturday night.
Yeah.
And I was one of them, got home late. And I tell you what, I have fallen in love with Colorado's radio announcer, Mark Williams, excuse me. I had a chance to listen to him coming back from the last two games. And he just paints a picture and is he's a crusty old cowboy.
Yeah.
But it's a guy that just has the golden throat for that. So those have been fun to watch. But yeah, and obviously working for hogville.net is the website and message board that we have for the Razorbacks now. And then fearlessfriday.net as I continue to celebrate my love for high school football.
Yeah, I love it, man. Yancy Porter's on with us right now. Rebel Yell Hotline. You can check them out Monday nights, 6 p.m. Central, Sports 56 WHBQ in Memphis, and all over Super Talk Mississippi. I understand that Montana State University in Bozeman, their new sideline reporter this year, guys, I don't know if y'all can confirm it or not, is Rip from Yellowstone, and it gets pretty ugly down there. He goes, "What was that effort there? We're going to the train station, man." It cannot end well. But Yancy, how are you, man? Go ahead.
I'm doing great.
Yeah, go ahead, Yancy. I'm sorry.
Hey, Yancy.
I just want to say, hey, Dudley, how you been, my man?
I'm doing good.
Yeah, it's good seeing your face.
Yancy, man, I saw your message last night. The old cell phone fell into the crapper. That's
Whoa.
Yeah.
Do we have an injury
Great
update on that so far? Yeah, man. You did have everything.
Get off
but you had everything backed up to the cloud, didn't you?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I'm not that big of a rookie.
Yeah. No. Listen. I mean, I've had this. My daughter was at Red Robin Hamburger Place one time. I was coming back from duck hunting in Cache, Arkansas, over on 226 near Egypt and Bono. My daughter was like, Dad, she was on her friend's phone. She goes, my phone fell into the toilet. And I said, well, it sounds like a personal problem. But then you got to go to the AT&T store in Memphis, and you're there for 3 or 4 hours. And when you leave, you've added 7 people you don't even know to some family plan. Dudley, I know you're smarter than that, so be careful with it. Hey, let's talk some college football, man. No drama. Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban. A lot of questions coming in. Franz Beard watching this morning down in Gainesville, Florida. Lane Kiffin and Pete Golding. Really good chance Ole Miss is going to leave the Tusks are Lusa with the win this weekend. Let's start with that.
With Franz or myself?
Yeah, with Franz's question there. I like that comment. That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Oh, with Franz's question, I mean, I don't feel good about the game. I'm going to be honest. Ole Miss they did not play a physical on either side of the scrimmage against Georgia Tech. We all know how physical Alabama is. We all know that there's so many questions surrounding Alabama. This is a rallying point. This just feels like, to me, one of those 45-7 drums. I don't know. I just – everything points towards Ole Miss, from the point spread to the fan sentiment to the coach's sentiment. Lane's trolling, Mickey, and it just this is when Alabama just steamrolls you, and that's my gut feeling.
Yeah, and I haven't been impressed, obviously, with what Alabama's done this year to this point, but I certainly would never put Nick Saban in a corner, as they say, because he'll come fighting out of there. I mean, he's still got a good football team. The quarterback position is not their only issue, but it has been a big one. I think that, if I had a lot of money, I'd put money on Ole Miss. But if I had to bet the house, I'd probably bet on Alabama.
Yeah, you see the point line started at right around there at 10. It's down to 6 now. So that's anytime you get that much action, 4 points on the public going Ole Miss, that's a very, very bad sign.
Yeah, watch those lines. They're sort of like, everybody can't be right at the same time. That's something that I know about the stock market. Al Goldman, head of technical market analysis at A.G. Edwards, used to say that on the Squawk Box all the time. The market's down 500 or 1,000 points. And Yancy, I'm sitting here and a lot of comments coming in on all these different games. Ole Miss, up until Missouri's 61-yard field goal to beat Kansas State, had the most impressive win by an SEC team this year, and it wasn't against the Power Five. It was against Group of Five, Tulane. Jackson Dart seems like he's playing better. If your quarterback is getting better and doing things better than he has, shouldn't that lift the team? I mean, I think what's going on, let me just throw this, both of y'all are veterans at this, but everybody thinks that Nick Saban's going to flick that switch, and this is like 2015 when that the second year in a row that Ole Miss beat them, and they're going to win the national championship. I talked to a lot of Alabama people that are vested in that program. They're going, well, there's no Derrick Henry back there to save you. There's no, Jacob Coker in 15. There's no Jalen Hurts. There's no Amari Cooper on the roster. This is a different makeup of this Alabama team, Yancy. And I don't feel like you do about Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss going into this game is going in real loose. I think it's Bama that's real tight.
Well, like Lane did say, there's 1 to 2 to at most 3 players that Alabama really wanted on Ole Miss's squad, and there's 85 players on Alabama's team that Ole Miss really wanted, right?
Yeah.
So let's, the pity party for Alabama, and no, there's no Derrick Henry, no, there's Tula or Young, but Ole Miss obviously has a huge edge there at quarterback. I think Dart's playing as good as anyone in the country right now. But I'm just worried about Ole Miss's lack of ability to run the ball when teams are going too high shell on defense. I mean, you look at Ole Miss the last 3 years under Lane Kiffin, they're averaging close to 300. And you take his first 3 years total, they averaged 338 yards rushing. Now, yes, you look at it on paper against Georgia Tech, and you see that they ran for 300, but they were not able to run the ball when Georgia Tech went in too high shell in the cover two. Ole Miss had some big pops that distorted the numbers. They had a 78-yard run, a 68-yard run that put the numbers up there. But if Ole Miss is going to beat Bama, Dart's going to have to get 100-plus yards rushing for whatever reason. Nobody knows. Judkins, who's thought of the best running back in the country coming into the season, just can't get going. I believe he has just at over 100 yards for the first 3 games combined. And we're not talking about playing, Alabama, Auburn, and LSU. We're talking about playing Mercer, Tulane, and Georgia Tech. So, from the outside looking in, it looks like everything's hunky-dory with Ole Miss right now. But from the inside looking in, there's some problems. And it all starts with the inability to run the ball when they want to run the football.
That's like what's going on up here with the Rocket Sanders being hurt and Arkansas not being able to rush the ball. I think you've got a pretty good odds that Rocket Sanders and Junkins would be leading the conference in rushing to start the season, but that certainly hadn't been the case, and that's just football, man. It's weird.
Yancy,
and
say that again.
Say what again?
No, the stats on Quinshon Judkins for the first 3 games, because I had someone texted me and said, "What the film did he just say?"
Yeah, he has just over 100 yards. He ran for 1,600 yards plus as a freshman, and he's got just over 100 against 3 non-conference teams combined, running for 2 yards per carry. Last year at this time, he's running for over 7 yards a carry. They got 4 out of the 5 offensive lineman returners. Everybody in the same. It's not like that he's breaking in a new offensive line. It is a very. They brought in a new offensive line coach, and he's changed the blocking schemes. They're not doing zone blocking anymore. He's changed some of the personnel, even though 2 of those offensive linemen did so well last year. They're not starting this year. They went and got 2 guys out of the portal, and his recruits, so to speak, are starting in their place. And it's been a mess. I'm not going to lie. Now, Dart is so good. Lane's play calling is so good that it can overcome some of those issues. But the problem that I see right now is that a lot of them are slow developing plays with Dart. They're not quick hitters. Alabama's they're going to put a lot of pressure on Dart. They're not going to be afforded that time to do a 3-4 second scramble around, get the ball out of your hand. They're going to have to get the ball out of his hands quickly. They're going to have to change their whole scheme that they use these first 3 games, or Alabama's going to roll.
Man, I tell you, Dudley, last year before the season's first game, Yancy was on here saying about Quinshon Judkins. He called that one. He set the price. Duke on the price of frozen concentrated orange juice futures. I mean, you were way ahead of the curve, Yancy. I'm concerned because I got a truth broker up here, Dudley Dawson, and you're the same way. You don't sugarcoat it. The offensive line problems. I know Jake Thornton, the 30-year-old offensive line coach from Ole Miss, is at Auburn now, but he inherited a dumpster fire. I think Auburn had recruited 9 offensive linemen total in the last decade. No, at least in the last 4 years. But the offensive line issues, but Alabama has issues. I mean, their defense.
Yeah, Alabama's
line,
issues are.
Freddie Roach, the defensive line coach for Alabama.
I know him well.
You there?
Yeah, I'm here.
I think the censors. Hey, I lost you there for a second. You were saying something about Freddie Roach. I think the censors from Moscow were getting to you.
Yeah, I'm on my computer, obviously not on my phone today.
There will be no more
Freddie
discussion. Yeah. Nothing at Chernobyl. Nothing to see.
Yeah, the thing with
I'm messing with
Freddie.
you. I'm messing with you.
No, I know you are. The thing with Freddie with Alabama is he comes after legendary Bo Davis. He's probably the best D-line coach.
We have a little bit of a delay here. Can we have some delay music, ladies and gentlemen?
Can you hear my man?
Yes. Yeah.
Are you able to hear clearly now?
You're right. That's the problem.
I apologize.
And you got. Yeah, I can hear you now. There's a little bit of a delay there, so go ahead. 1, 2. Yeah, it sounds great.
All right.
Great.
Is it live now? Can you hear it live now?
Here we go. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi.
Why y'all are doing that? I had somebody ask me this week
there?
what just happened with Oklahoma State. I said their quarterback is a backup.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah, go ahead.
That's the biggest thing.
Go ahead, caller.
Rob, are you able to hear now?
Yancy, talk about
I'm going to log off and come back on.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Are you fine now? Yeah, man, I can hear y'all fine.
Okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that.
My connection
Yancy,
here.
there was a little bit of a delay with Yancy.
Office.
Yeah. Okay. There may be a little bit of a delay there. That's what it might be. And it could be the sensors from Moscow because I think they monitor all communications, what have you. But hey, let me look at a stat here while Dudley's rebooting. And Yancy's rebooting. 5th most viewers of any ESPN college football game, Colorado State, Colorado, guys. And I saw Deion Sanders was saying 9.6 million people watched Colorado State, Colorado. Hell, after the Florida-Tennessee game, I was in a man cave up in Clarksville with all the in-laws, all Tennessee fans. They were pretty beaten down. We're watching that Colorado State, Colorado game. But that's the highest number of people in history to watch a late night, college football game. 9.6 million. Say what you want about Deion Sanders, Yancy. He's getting eyeballs to the TV and creating interest in the game. And we had Miami in the 80s and 90s as the villain. Notre Dame's always been polarizing just because they're so big and get so much publicity. Now you've got Deion, and he's in college football, and I think he's not what a lot of people think he is. I think he's good for college football.
No question he is. He's en route to being the highest paid college football coach, and not the end of this season, by next season. I mean, he's stolen the show around America.
Wow. Highest paid. Dudley?
Oh, I agree. I mean, there are a lot of people around here who believe that Arkansas and other schools had the opportunity to hire him and didn't, which is adding to Sam Pittman's, criticism and the staff's criticism over last week's game. He is great for college football. I mean, you just 9 million, and it's been in that spot has usually been a million or less. I mean, I'm not sure I wrote the best story I could on Saturday night because I was anxious to get home and see the tail end of that game. He is highly entertaining. He's polarizing. It's good for college football. And I'm as old school as they get, but I think he's good for college football.
He is. And Yancy, here's a question from somebody, and I'm just going to read it to you. Teams are playing 8 in the box against Ole Miss to stop the run. That's why Jackson Dart is averaging 12.5 yards per attempt.
Yeah, I mean, it's, they're going to have to – they're not always doing that. They're playing too high shell a lot against Ole Miss. Georgia Tech dared them to run the ball in the first half, and they just simply couldn't do it until Dart started running the ball himself. And that's going to – all eyes are on Judkins. Dart's going to have to tote the load for – if they're going to beat Alabama, he's going to have to run for more than 100. He's going to have to put up about 350 yards of offense, I believe. They're going to have to put the ball in his hands and let him make plays. He's Ole Miss's best player. It's not even close. I think he's playing as good as anybody in the country right now. And he's going to have to carry the load. I mean, Jackson Dart's playing at a very high level right now. But, again, they're going to have to get the ball quicker out of his hands. He can't roll around. He can't, do 3-5 step drops. He's got to get the ball quick out of his hands and use the middle of the field. They're giving him the too high look. Use the middle of the field, some quick slants, some tight out bleeds. They can't just throw 40-yard passes down the field.
Looking at Dudley, the problems with Arkansas and Ole Miss, they start with your star running backs, the 2 best in the SEC, Rocket Sanders at Arkansas, Quinshon Judkins at Ole Miss. Either Quinshon's hurt, the offensive line problems aren't helping.
Issues.
We know, yeah. It's what, Dudley? I mean, the Yancy?
Rib issues. He's got some bruised ribs.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's, oh man, if you've ever been kicked in the ribs by a horse or just, fighting with your brothers, sisters, whatever, every time you breathe, it's like someone's sticking a knife in you. That's a nightmare scenario. Dudley, here's an interesting thing. Offensive line is just as big a problem for Alabama as QB. I mean, I talked with Alabama people. We had Rodney Orr from Tighter Insider on yesterday, and they're asking as many questions as you have, Yancy. I think both teams, Ole Miss and Alabama, have more questions going into this game than I can remember in this rivalry.
Yeah, and I might be a little bit pessimistic. So many ghosts to go in there against Alabama when they're under these circumstances. Yeah. I believe it's 2000. Alabama was, I believe Ole Miss was 5-1, and Alabama was maybe 2-3. Ole Miss was favored by more than a touchdown down in Tuscaloosa, and I left that stadium, and Alabama whipped them 45-7. So it's just when Alabama is backed in a corner like they are right now, I've just seen it too many times. And, it feels like that classic Alabama. Everybody's giving up on them. The dynasty's over. When is Saban retiring? We don't have a quarterback. Poor Alabama, although they got 18 5-stars on their team. Remember that. And then, boom, they roll somebody at home. And then next thing you know, you look at them and they're 10-1 and they're talking about going to the playoffs. I mean, it just has that feeling to me.
One thing that I certainly agree with Yancy is the middle of the field. I mean, I think using the middle of the field is just cool. I think a lot of teams have gotten away from that. And these offensive line issues that we're talking at several different schools, including Arkansas, get you to where you want to get the quick hitters, get the passes out, get that going. But Arkansas has a tight end named Luke Hawes, freshman tight end, that's really good. He's a matchup problem. I believe he needs to be thrown into the offense a little bit more. Like offensive coordinators get away from using the middle of the field. And that's even if the defense allows you to do that, you've got to adjust as you're going along and use the entire field, but don't forget about the middle.
Well, that's a great point, Dudley. And what's killing Ole Miss right now, too, is that their top two tight ends and really a guy that was going to be a centerpiece for this offense, the the University of Memphis tight end transfer that they signed, Creasthorne. He hasn't played this year. He broke his toe 2 weeks before the season started, and he's been in the boot. Now, there's speculation he could play this weekend, but he's that big traditional 6'5", 260-pound guy that can go out and catch the ball that Ole Miss is really missing right now. Then Hudson Wolf, bless his soul, he takes 3 years to come back from a high school back injury. He's really the talk of the camp. He comes out, he snags a 16-yard pass out of the Scott scene and came down and broke his collarbone on the very first pass catch of his career. So I mean, it's just that Ole Miss has been really jinxed at the tight end position, it feels like, and they need that tight end, as you said, to work the middle of the field and also to chip in and help in the run blocking, because right now the whole defense is just keying in on Judkins.
Yeah,
they'll always be Memphis State to me.
Yeah,
I don't understand why they would change it to Memphis. I mean, are we talking about the Grizzlies? Are we talking about Memphis State? Are we talking about the city? And why they would want to distinguish where it makes it confusing from everything else? That's the biggest mystery in the world, why they want to change it from Memphis State to Memphis. But Dudley is always Memphis State to me.
Well, you know what's funny? Hey, speaking of Memphis, when y'all come to Memphis, I'm taking y'all down to my favorite bar in the world, established in 1953, Alex's Tavern, the Greek, 1445 Jackson Avenue. We've been going there since we were legally old enough to have a beer, of course. Shuffleboard, chicken tenders, barbecued Greek shrimp, the Greek ribs that the Rendezvous is envious of, the burgers. The beer's so cold, it's got ice crystals on there, and sometimes you have to let your beer thaw. 6 giant screen TVs, a jukebox with over 5,000 tunes, and the air conditioning constantly at about 48 degrees. It's like the White River when it comes out of the dam. But it's incredible. So anyway, for a long time, Sonny Wilson worked there, and Sonny was eternally, we never knew his age, but Sonny was a man and a philosopher. And you go in the bathroom, there are Sonnyisms all over the wall, like Peoples is crazy. Some guy came in one time and said, I'd like a Miller Lite, a Bud Light, and a Bass Ale. And he goes, I'm sorry, we don't serve no fish here at Alex's. And but Sonny used to say, when Memphis would win a game back in the day, he would say, Memphis Steak done beat up on a cripple team. He called them Memphis Steak. So, but that bar it's the best bar. Right now they're doing a documentary, and you go in there on Thursday nights, they're putting together a documentary like a 30 for 30. But a lot of movies, they filmed places in there, but you got to love the tavern. I'm with y'all. To both of y'all, and Yancy, I apologize, and to you, Dudley, as well, for the internet issues we had. There's a black helicopter hovering out in the yard over here at the Cherry Farm, and I'm not sure what's going on. There's a sickle and hammer on the side of that helicopter, but no, that was my fault, so I apologize. Your audio, Yancy, is perfect, as is yours, Dudley. For both of y'all, and you're right about college football. The interest and the demand, Colorado, they sold out every game this season. Again, when was the last time there was that much excitement in Boulder? When they legalized marijuana. I'm convinced. I say that every day, but they're really excited out there. And Boulder is a beautiful campus. I mean, have both of y'all been to Boulder?
Yes,
I have.
Yeah.
Several times.
I notice my kids, whenever they're out near there, they always stop in Boulder and they go shopping. God, I don't know what for, but they go shopping there. And they love Boulder. Everybody does. The setting, I tell you what, the setting there is gorgeous for a football game.
It's unbelievable. Boulder's a really nice town, period. But even without the university, it's a great town.
Yeah. How far is it from Red Rocks, Colorado, the famous venue for gospel concerts?
Gospel.
It's about an hour and a half. About an hour and a half.
Okay. Okay. I would take an Uber if I was going to Red Rocks. I mean, I'm going to tell you.
My daughter Camille is actually visiting this week, and I think she spends most of her time at Red Rocks, and then has a job up there as well. So,
well, I had 2 weeks ago, my youngest son Max, living out in Wyoming, sends a picture of him on the blue turf at Boise. I mean, he had the day off and he went up to Boise. I'm like, holy cow, but it's as blue as it looks, but I tell you guys, we're about out of time. We're going to go in hour number 2. Jordan Hill's going to join us from 24/7 Sports, talking about Georgia and their near miss. But y'all stay on if you can. Love having you. I love it when we are able to get the different people that cover these different schools, because objectivity is never a problem with y'all. Y'all are absolute pros. Catch Yancy Porter, folks, Monday nights, 6 p.m., Sports 56 WHBQ, Rebel Yell Hotline with Chuck Rounsville. And Yancy, I got to say, I've met Chuck a couple of times. You know him. He's one of the nicest people, the Ole Miss spirit. He's one of the original ones, like Dudley, like you. Y'all are just, Iron Men. You go through it all. But every time I listen to Rebel Yell Hotline, I love to listen to these different shows. It's just a cool message. And I was talking with a friend of mine last night, an Alabama guy, and he was friends with Stan Sandroni, rest his soul. But y'all have built a great team and a great culture that cover Ole Miss, but you also bring in guests. By the way, when y'all play Arkansas, you ought to get Dudley on there, man. Dudley is Mr. Hogg. He really knows the program. But y'all stay on if you can. We're going to take a quick break. If you can, Jordan Hill's going to join us over in Athens. We're going to talk about the Dogs as they go for a three-peat here on this Wednesday morning edition of Sidelines.
Red River Ford and Toyota, located in Wynne, Arkansas. If you're in the market for a new or used car, truck, or SUV, call, go online, or drop by and see them. Located 45 minutes from Memphis, go off the 4 City exit on I-40 and go north about 15 minutes on Highway 1. Easy to work with and still believe in customer service. If you live out of town, they will deliver your vehicle to you. RedRiverFordToyota.com. Just see what they can do.
Strengthen your seed zone this spring with quality tillage equipment from House Industries. Located in Cherry Valley, Arkansas, House Industries specializes in manufacturing superior equipment that will minimize your downtime and keep you working in the field. To ensure the highest quality control, all design, fabrication, and testing takes place in a 99,000 square foot manufacturing facility located right here in the heart of the Delta. Locate your nearest House equipment dealer online at houseindustriesinc.com.
House Industries, breaking ground.
Sidelines with Rob Browne. Talk sporty to me.
No, all right. We are back here. Rob Browne, Yancy Porter, and now we're going to bring in Jordan Hill, 24/7 Sports over in Athens. And Yancy Porter's on with us, Rebel Yell Hotline. We had Dudley Dawson, hogville.net. Just kind of, we get the band. It's like, again, Austin City Limits on here. Love to get the different folks that cover the different schools. And Jordan, last Saturday, I'm watching. All I can say is I had South Carolina to cover, but I thought it'd be like a 28-14 Georgia win. I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I did. But my whole thinking was they'll come in. It's Georgia's first conference game of the year, and you're naturally going to probably play a little bit tighter. But they did what a championship team does. They went in there at halftime. They made adjustments. It came out, touchdown, and it was over.
Yeah, I mean, I get why there were a lot of fans upset with that performance. We got to hear from a bunch of them over there on the junkyard on the board. But, I got to give Georgia a lot of credit. Some of us were talking at halftime, and I told the people around me I didn't think Georgia was winning this game, just how they'd played. They'd missed opportunities. Spencer Rattler played a heck of a game, even though the final numbers didn't look that good. But they settled in, and like you said, Rob, they did what championship teams did. What you expect them to do. Getting the ball to start that third quarter was huge. I think if Georgia goes 3 and out, or if they move the ball a little bit, then have to punt, maybe talking about a different ball game, maybe talking about South Carolina pulling off the upset in Athens. But they went right down. I thought the play of the game was Carson Beck hitting Ra Thomas for about a 36-yard gain. And you could tell it fired up Sanford Stadium. You could tell that it sort of gave everybody a jolt. And, they took care of business on both sides of the ball. Spencer Rattler just did not look the same in the second half. The Georgia pass rush finally started getting home. I had a lot of people asking me, why did Georgia play so conservative on defense in the first half and turn it up in the second? They didn't in the first half. They were blitzing a good bit, just wasn't getting home. And when you give a good quarterback like Spencer Rattler time and less defenders to have to deal with back there in coverage, he's going to pick you apart, and that's what Spencer did. But they turned it up. Special teams did a very good job in the second half, leaving South Carolina with bad field position. And from there, it was all over. Again, a lot to clean up. I'm sure that the coaches have been on those guys hard this week. But, it's always a better problem to have when you're cleaning up things after a win rather than trying to explain what happened in a loss and try to fix it from there.
Yeah. Yancy?
Apologize
Yancy.
about that. Yeah, I mean, I caught some of the Georgia game there, and second half they just simply dominated. They look like Alabama of the old when they just kind of flipped that switch, and South Carolina controlled the first half, as you said, and they've got. But it's not surprising. I mean, Spencer, he's a veteran quarterback. Obviously, what Georgia's dealing with is not, and I think the experience took a hold, and then Georgia kind of got a feel for the game throughout the first half, and turned it on in the second half, probably with your 25 five-star defensive players over there. So it's, Georgia's just recruited at a level that has not been seen in the modern era outside of Alabama, and depth and power took over.
No doubt about it. And I thought it was really interesting, especially after the fact. You listen to Kirby as he was getting ready to go in the locker room, no panic, said, look, one moment at a time. And that's sort of what the players told us afterwards was like, hey, there was no rah-rah, fiery speeches, nothing like that at halftime. It was just more of an understanding of like, hey, it's a 14-3 game. There's 2 quarters left. We need to show up and go play. And they did. And a lot of credit due to I think it starts at the top down. That Kirby Smart, if you saw him in that first half, he wasn't ranting and raving on the sideline. He wasn't getting in people's face. He was real calm. He's talked a bunch about Carson Beck being cool, even killed when things are going good, when things aren't going good. I think you saw that too with how that offense operated. And it's wild to me how different these games have felt with the new clock rules. There just wasn't a whole lot of possessions in that first half. There was, I think Georgia might have had 3 or 4 in that first half, and when you don't score on all of them, it kind of sets you up where you're having these issues. But yeah, it's one of those games. I think Kirby would have very much rather had won it, 50-0 or covered that spread. But you do learn a lot about a team when they're in a situation like this, when they're kind of got their back against the wall. And Georgia rose to the occasion and wound up finding a way to win.
Well, they did, and here's something from Cy Sperling in Boca del Boca, Florida, wherever that is. Georgia looks different this year on offense. Obviously, they do without Todd Monken, and it's a different thing having Carson Beck there at quarterback. But really, the question I would ask, and to piggyback off of Cy Sperling, I think he's the guy that owns Hair Club America. I hope that's really him. Cy, send us, join Club 250. We'd love to have you. I'll put my Venmo up there in a minute. But Brock Bowers, is he being double, tripled? I mean, it's like we're not hearing as much about him. He's going to have his breakout game and get on a roll. But the first couple of years, I think 1,842 yards, 19 or 20 touchdowns, and then 9 carries for 111 yards, 3 touchdowns rushing out of Napa, California. What about him? Because he's a weapon. He's a force for good in college football.
Yeah, there's been some rumors that he's been a little banged up, that he's not been 100%. Kirby wouldn't confirm that after the game. Basically said, "Look good to me." Did he look hurt to you? But there were moments in that game, and something that I think, and I wrote about this over at Dogs 24/7. Georgia's first drive to the red zone in the first half, there was a second down play where he was targeted. South Carolina defender kind of got away with a pull on Brock during that route. Probably should have been defensive pass interference. That would have given Georgia a new set of downs. Instead, it's 3rd and goal. They wind up throwing a short screen, having to kick a field goal. So that sort of changes the tenor of the whole drive. But yeah, I've been a little surprised we haven't seen Brock more productive. But again, there's been rumblings that he's a little beat up. That's sort of the nature of where things are. And when you play at a school like Georgia, I mean, it's so competitive and the practices are so physical. It's hard to keep guys healthy, and Georgia's kind of running into that problem right now with a lot of guys still banged up. But yeah, I'll be watching to see when we sort of have that breakout game of the season for Brock Bowers. I thought it was understandable for someone to look at him as sort of a dark horse Heisman guy, could put up those big numbers, could be someone Carson Beck really leans on. And they threw to him a good bit in that second half. It was sort of him and Dom Lovett catching most of the passes, but not a whole lot of big plays from him so far this year. I'm sure they may kind of take it easy on him in this UAB game on Saturday and see what he can do on the road against Auburn in 2 weeks.
Yancy.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about Bowers, I just kind of daydream of what Lane Kiffin could do with him and the problems that Ole Miss has had there at tight end with the injuries. And, he would make Ole Miss's offenses totally different. But, on a realistic point, he's just a special player. He'll get going. I mean, they're breaking in. Georgia's breaking in a new quarterback, a new offensive coordinator. It takes a little while to get a rhythm. And I tell you, a game like Saturday for Georgia against South Carolina is good for the team. I mean, it's good to get down. It's good to know that you can come back. It's good to get that unity. It's good to dance in the locker room after a big rival win. I mean, winning 45-7 is totally different than having to come back from a 14-3 deficit at halftime. I don't know. I don't follow Georgia, obviously, as close as Rob does. But, it's you got to I just think that Georgia is going to be a total different team by the end of the year. I think that their offense is learning daily what their identity is, what they can do with the new quarterback and the new coordinator. And I think Georgia's fine. I think they're just finding their stride right now.
I think so too. I think that's a good feel for where this team is. And we talked about this earlier in the week on our podcast over at Dogs 24/7. But look at the rest of the SEC right now. I mean, for
it's just a
where
mess.
Georgia is, you probably kind of take where they are. I mean, it's basically
Correct.
Georgia and LSU and Ole Miss, and then everybody else just trying to figure things out. And we'll learn a lot more this weekend with some of those games coming up. But yeah, I think it's one of those situations. I think a lot about last year's game against Missouri. They win 26-22. Ugly game. And another game that in the middle of it, I was like, Georgia ain't winning this game. Like, Missouri's going to come out of this with a win. And Kirby was asked about that after the fact and said, there were similarities to that Missouri game and this South Carolina game. So, yeah, you take the win if you're Georgia. You say, hey, we're moving on and still in a good spot, starting SEC play 1-0 and trying to keep it going, keep that momentum rolling forward.
Well, you just hit on it. Every team in the SEC has issues. There's not, and Yancy said this last week after the show. It's going to be a great year in terms of excitement, especially for the TV people, because in my son Wilson's comment, it's making every weekend like opening weekend of March Madness. And what's more exciting than, let's be honest, St. Patrick's Day on a Thursday or Friday of opening weekend of March Madness? You just can't beat it. And I'm not saying you have to be in Savannah or New Orleans or Dublin to have that much fun, but I just think there's tremendous interest. I'm just looking at these questions, and again, Mildred, I need Audrey in here to type. I'm getting a ton of them from text, but they're also coming in on YouTube. And to everybody listening and watching, type your questions and send them in on YouTube and mash the subscribe button and join us. And like I say, Dudley is already off from hogville.net, but to Jordan, to Yancy, if you would do us a favor, retweet and share the show, and we'll do the same for you. I just see comments like Georgia depth exhaust Gamecocks in second half. It's a culture that Kirby's created, and he's about to, I'm sure you know this, Jordan, but Yancy and everybody listening, Kirby wins Saturday. That's going to be 85-15. And is, that's an 85%. Do the math. Even Jethro Bodine can figure that out. That's 85% winning. That's going to be faster than Coach Paul W. Bryant did it. Nobody's done it that fast. Yet the people, what drives me crazy, guys, and I'll throw this at you, either one of you want to answer it. Why can't people give Kirby credit for being a damn good coach? Oh, he's just got more players than everybody. Well, do you know how hard it is to manage 85 egos of 4- and 5-star players? That takes a gift, gentlemen.
No doubt. And I think that I'll just say this, Yancy, and then you can respond. But yeah, I mean, I think that he walked into what most people would consider a sleeping giant. I mean, he walked into a very good situation, and there are benefits. He's been in the East. The West is traditionally more competitive than the East is, but he's taken advantage of it. And there's been a lot of bumps along the way. There's been mistakes. There's been missed opportunities. But what he's done, I mean, I'm somebody that's not going to say that he is the greatest of all time. I still think that's Nick Saban. I think it takes a lot of winning to even be in that conversation. But by far the greatest Georgia head coach, that's ever been, and the success that he's had. People are always going to find things to nitpick. Again, I've been working here. I've covered one national championship. There was one before I got here. And there's always plenty of people who aren't happy, who think that, Kirby's got things he needs to change. The thing so far this year is, what are we doing at kicker? What needs to happen there? We need to make a change there. We need to do this. We need to do that. People always have their opinions. People always got something they want to say.
What makes Kirby unique is, like Saban, is in today's era, whether you're in pro sports or college sports, offensive-minded head coaches rule the roost. And then you get Saban, and then you get Kirby. And they're unique. Let's be honest. The head coaches that thrive in today's era are offensive-minded head coaches, and Kirby and Saban are not. They're the old school defensive guys, and they've been able to recruit at such a high level offensive players, knowing that these offensive players are going into defensive-minded head coaches programs, and that's what makes them unique. That's very hard to do.
I think both of y'all, I mean, would agree with this. Here's Franz Beard, love it. And Franz is a big part of our team. He's watching down in Gainesville. As long as Will Muschamp calls the defense, Georgia's going to be formidable. And Glenn Schumann, Dan Lanning. You know where they all worked for a while? Tuscaloosa.
Definitely, and that's the thing that's interesting too. I mean, we were having this conversation about what sort of next, Glenn Schumann after Georgia, and I mean, I don't know if he'll be here 2 more years, if he'll stick with Kirby going forward. But I mean, he's done an outstanding job. He gets a ton of credit. We talked to one of his inside linebackers, Xavier Sori, last night. I mean, Glenn Schumann, I don't think gets enough respect nationally when they talk about the best assistant coaches. And it's funny to me going back to when Kirby was hired at Georgia. His first hire was Glenn Schumann. He was a guy that was sort of in on those defensive meetings with Saban and Kirby when they were in Tuscaloosa. He was super young when he got to Georgia. I'm trying to remember. I think he was 27 or 28, young, and they brought him in as an assistant, and he sort of worked his way up. But yeah, I mean, my thing, especially when they are in recruiting and, Georgia takes maybe a 3-star defensive player and people are like, hey, this guy's not that highly rated. I think those guys, Kirby and really that entire defensive staff, they've always earned the benefit of the doubt when it comes to finding the players who will fit their system. And especially if they're DBs, don't even worry about it. Just go ahead and check a box, get ready to see what they do when they get to Athens.
And looking at the big picture, you know how many coaches from Will Muschamp's failed tenure at South Carolina are on the Alabama staff now? 4, maybe 5. Why did that happen? And I agree with another thing here from Shoney down in Valdosta. Muschamp is still in Gainesville if he had offensive coordinator help. And again, I don't know Kurt Roper, but he has been there. He's kind of like Slugsworth and Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, the original one. Remember that guy that was always there when someone got the golden ticket? He was there at the end of several coaches' tenures. Kurt Roper. Again, I don't know him, but where is he coaching now? Because anyone that doesn't think Will Muschamp is an elite coach is crazy. He was in Memphis, I think, Friday night at the Baylor CBHS game. His son is on the team there. Find me someone who knows Will Muschamp who doesn't love the guy. Because and Jordan, you know what I'm talking about. He's got a lot of friends in Auburn. Jimbo Fisher's got a lot of friends in Auburn. When he's been there on 3 different tours of duty, but you get a chance to talk to him and spend much time with Will.
Oh no, they're not going to let us hang out with the assistants very much. But I did want to say to your point about the guys that are in Alabama. Look at Georgia staff right now. It's Will, it's Brian McClendon, who was co-offensive coordinator at South Carolina with Will, and Mike Bobo, who was brought in for that 2020 season at South Carolina. He winds up being the interim head coach. I thought it was funny last week. Someone brought up, hey, Georgia's got like a 19-game winning streak at home going into that South Carolina game. The last loss was against South Carolina, which was Will Muschamp, some of those guys. And they said, they asked Kirby, do you bring that up? You talk about it with the team, and Kirby said, nah, I don't want to give Brian McClendon and Will Muschamp pleasure. Like, I don't want them to feel good about that win from 4 years ago. But, those guys, I think people forget that, that I want to say that was his second year at Florida. They went to the Sugar Bowl. I mean, they had success. They just couldn't get it figured out on offense. And I think, too, when you look at his South Carolina tenure, started really strong. That first team was not expected to be that good. It's just super hard to win at South Carolina. I think sometimes we lose sight of that when you saw runs like Steve Spurrier and probably to a lesser extent Lou Holtz. South Carolina is a hard place to win at, especially since they've been in the SEC. And I think Will's a heck of a coach. I see him being here pretty much as long as he wants to. And I could see him staying teamed up with Kirby and seeing how much they can win together.
Yeah. And Yancy, that's a scary thought. I mean, Will, great recruiter, great developer of talent. Boom is what they called him at Auburn. I remember, he gets so fired up. Yancy, you put him in your Mount Rushmore of defensive coordinators?
Yeah, I mean, it's just an unbelievable recruiter, just like Kirby. And, that's some staffs spend an enormous amount of time on the recruiting trails, and that's why Kirby was able to develop the talent that he has. You know, I remember Freeze did the same thing at Ole Miss, and I've heard people accuse Kirby of cheating just like they did Freeze and all that. But it's not about cheating. It's about what kind of time you spend in recruiting, building relationships, and Kirby along with Muschamp are a dynamic duo. You know, when you get that kind of talent, and they're not getting that talent without working hard, just like Saban did. Saban is one of the best recruiters of all time. So that's how it all started.
Yeah, and David Jolly, I was talking to him, met him 3 weeks ago at the Touchdown Club in Memphis when Tony Barnhart was there, and I was there Monday night when Alyssa Lang was there from SEC Network. And folks, she is fantastic. She really worked all over to get to where she is. She's from Charlotte. It's pretty funny hearing her talk about her parents. She grew up pulling for the Hokies, Lane Stadium, Inner Sandman. But man, you know, Jordan, one more question. I know you got to get going. You got a busy schedule. This is Shoney. Ask Jordan what happened to Stetson Bennett with the LA Rams. Again, you know, have you talked to the owner, Stan Kroenke, today? I mean, I don't know if you know or not, but what's your guess?
Yeah, don't really know. Not sure. I mean, based on what I've heard, it doesn't sound like it's injury related. You know, and I'm not going to speculate on it. I just hope whatever's going on with Stetson, hope everything gets in order, and hopefully he's back with the team sooner rather than later.
Yeah, I don't think you'll hear it from Yancy or Chris Lee, who's about to join us from the Southeastern 14, or anybody. I don't wish bad on people. And again, like you know, about Greg Brooks, Arkansas player that transferred to LSU, is going through a rough time right now. And, you know, if you do, I don't want you on the show. I mean, I look for positive things. And Jordan, I want to give you a compliment. You and Yancy and the people we have on here, you're not trying to get it first and clickbait and all that. You're trying to get it right. And I really respect that. And let me ask you, in your 6 years that you were in Auburn, too bad you were too young to ever go to the greatest bar in Auburn, Harry's Tavern, where the elite meet to eat and drink. A friend of mine got arrested one time in college on his motorcycle at SAE No Regard weekend in his boxers and his cowboy boots, and was taken away to jail. Harry's is quite the place. But Jordan, one more thing. Kurt Roper's at NC State now. Thank you, Franz Beard. Didn't know where he was, but Jordan, last question, and I'll let you go, and then let people know how they can follow you. And if you would, please share the show and give us a retweet. We really appreciate it. You're very active, and you get everything you can out of the limited practice that you get. You got to protect sources and all, but your gut feeling on this Georgia team, they got UAB coming in Saturday. What's the ceiling on this Georgia team versus the previous two that have both won national championships?
I think they got a ways to go if they're going to win another national championship. I've got questions about this offensive line after Marius Mims hurt his ankle, going to have tightrope ankle surgery. Don't know how long he'll be out, but I mean, he's probably their best offensive lineman, their right tackle, so they got to fill that spot. And they're still looking for help at running back. They're still banged up there. They've been playing Dylan Bell, who's a receiver at running back, a good bit. I still like Georgia's chances of winning the SEC. I still think they're a playoff contender, but I got to see more of it. I got to see more consistency on offense if I'm to believe they're going to be able to go back to back to back. But I'm going to get out of here, guys. Go dogs247.com, on Twitter at Jordan Davis Hill, on Twitter at dogs247. Busy time of year and getting ready for another Saturday night game in Sanford Stadium.
I love it. Hey, look forward to having you on next week. Always appreciate everything you do. It means a lot. All right. Oh, okay. Well, let me bring Chris Lee back on here. Yancy Porter, this is Chris Lee. Vandy rivals, also the Southeastern 14 up in Nashville. And Yancy Porter, Chris, is with Rebel Yell Hotline, Monday nights at 6 o'clock on Sports 56 WHBQ and Super Talk Mississippi. He's been covering the Rebels for 27 years, a proud native son over in the pine country of Hattiesburg, Mississippi. And Chris, are you from Nashville or are you from Mississippi?
I'm from Hendersonville, technically, which is just north of Nashville. So I'm from the area.
That's where the high school Pope St. John Paul II is in Hendersonville. That's where Golden Tate played. Yes. Did you go to school? You're not that young. I don't know if you're older, obviously, than Golden Tate. Yeah.
Pope John Paul was not around when I was in high school.
Okay.
I went to Hendersonville, and to bring this full circle, Dwayne Dotson was a high school classmate of mine. So,
Yancy, you remember Dwayne Dotson and Cassius Ware, two of the most bad linebackers on that 92 Ole Miss defense I have ever seen.
Yeah, old Dwayne D. Dotson, he broke my heart there at Tennessee Ole Miss in the Liberty Bowl there in 1990 when Ole Miss, all they had to do was beat a very weak Tennessee team that year. And I mean, Dotson was a one-man wrecking crew. And then, Lord and behold, the next year he transfers to Ole Miss. So, yeah, I remember Dwayne Dotson very well.
Yeah. Chris, I was Audrey and I, after the show Saturday, the roundtable, had to drive up to Clarksville, Tennessee for the brother-in-law's birthday with all the Vols in the man cave. And it was Heartbreak Hotel. Should have had it in Memphis. Elvis would have been proud. But, I mean, it was tough. The season's over. It's done. Vandy loses that game. I'm listening to 102.5 on the radio. Vandy UNLV lost that game late. So let's get started with, the Vandy. I like Clark Lee a lot. I like him because Yancy, I agree. He gets mad when people say, you got to be happy with 5-7 last year. He goes, no, that's presumptuous. I like him. I want a guy that wants to put his fist through the wall after a loss. I don't want the guy that's okay with losing.
Yeah, that was a big blow game. They should have won. They're up 17-0. I mean, you're up 17 points on UNLV, a rebuilding UNLV. How you lose that game is you've got to take care of business there. They didn't. They lost 4 turnovers. Turnovers were an issue the week before against Wake Forest. If you want a bottom line in what's gone on the last 2 weeks in their losses, I think that's it. But that also points to the margin of error. There's a lot of teams that could be -2 or -3 against UNLV and still win that game. That's kind of where they are as a program. I don't think it's just one thing. I think it's several things, and they just don't have the talent to overcome sloppy play, and sloppy play absolutely cost them a game in Vegas on Saturday.
They lost the game. What's the general demeanor around the team? I mean, you got a bunch of guys that are mad when they lose, don't you?
I mean, you would hope so. From what I was told yesterday, being over there, that nobody's hit the panic button yet. I don't have any stories of morale or division or things like that. Like sometimes when it goes poorly for a team, your phone's blowing up. You're hearing things about this or that, or the locker room's not great. I'm not hearing that. I'm not saying it's not going on. But it appears to me they're just losing football games because they're not quite talented enough to overcome the mistakes they're making. And my goodness, they're making a lot of mistakes right now.
Yeah. What about, before I go to Yancy, one more question. Bill and Sheila James, my friends, their son, Christian, is he back? Is he going to be back this week? I know he's trying to recover from an injury. A little bit idiot savant fact that his parents told me. He has a black belt in Taekwondo and also Jiu-Jitsu at 6'5", 290. Also practices mixed martial arts. Quite the nimble guy. I don't know if he'll take up gymnastics or not.
Yeah, that name came up yesterday in the press conference. I believe Clark Lee said he's out this week, but maybe possible for next week. That would be Missouri. So certainly Vanderbilt needs all the help it can get. And Christian James is certainly going to be a part of that defensive line rotation when he is back and healthy.
Yeah, well, that is good. Yancy?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, he can't commit 4 turnovers after being up 17-0. I still like the direction that Coach Clark has got the program going. I like the excitement he's built around the program. I think he's going to do well there. I really do. I think, Vanderbilt's on the rise. I know it's hard to see after you lose a game like that to UNLV that you have no business losing. But the eye for somebody from the outside looking in, I think Vandy's on the rise. I really do.
Yeah, and Chris, I want to ask you about Barton Simmons involved. He went to MBA, didn't he? And Clark went to MBA, and he's a big guy. We know about it. Everybody that follows recruiting knows what he does. I go back to, Tim Corbin. Let's get every baseball player within 250 miles of campus. Again, Nashville's an amazing city. But when I talk to my friends that are from Nashville, I got a lot of them. I mean, I'm in Memphis, Nashville. They're going, we're going to become another Atlanta. And, Nashville, when I was up there for media days where I met you, when I get up to go run in the morning downtown, it was great. And all of a sudden you would know you were on a street where the traffic was going the opposite way. And here comes a garbage truck and you're about to get, squashed, as Roy D. Mercer would say. Maybe you squashed my boy, Kenyon G's hamster. He was terrible. But Nashville's exploding in growth. But it's also, and Yancy, I think you would agree, looked at now as the, best high school football in the state of Tennessee. Talk about that. And look, anybody with, gray matter in their brain will admit you can sell that, what is it? The Owen College of Business up there at Vanderbilt. I think it kind of, get an MBA from there. You don't go looking for a job. You just decide which job you're going to take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think
Go ahead, Yancy. I'm sorry.
I apologize. I just don't think it's a coincidence that Nashville is where the top recruits are coming out of the state now. I mean, Nashville is, obviously is taking over the state of Tennessee. You look at the land value that's gone around there in the last 10 years, the amount of businesses that have moved to Nashville. And then you look at what's happened to the city of Memphis, and they've been in a down cycle now. It seems like 10, 15 years, a long down cycle where Memphis used to control the state prospect-wise. So Nashville's taken over, and, everything is centered around Nashville in the state of Tennessee right now.
Yeah, Rob, I think it's a couple things. I think it's just general population growth, more people. You're more likely to have good players. I think it's having pro sports. I've got a 9-year-old son that plays baseball, and every year we run into a kid on another team whose dad played for the Titans, or you have random former major leaguers in baseball moving here. He'll have a kid that's on the other side that's the son of so-and-so. I think those are just two things. When you get those things, you're going to have more talent. I think that's a lot of what's going on here. Some of the names that you see as prospects, you're like, oh yeah, I watched his dad play. And sometimes it's just that.
Well, you've got the Titans there. Brentwood Academy, I know over the years, I remember 20 years ago having lunch with some coaches at Auburn and a man named Carlton Flatt, which we're all familiar with. Never lost a district game at Brentwood Academy. And I always thought it was ironic that I think y'all would agree that so many great athletes, parents were transferred there for business reasons, and somehow they ended up at Brentwood Academy. It was just always I guess it's an incredible, about 600 kids out there. I think everybody's required to play at least one sport. You got NBA, you got Father Ryan, then you got Innsworth. I mean, Innsworth, sounds like some kid, eating crab cakes at the family compound in Hyannisport, Massachusetts. But Innsworth has dropped off a little bit. Father Ryan strong, NBA struggling this year. But high school football is the lifeblood. How visible is Vandy? And also, I got a question coming in right now, and I'll put it up here for you about Vanderbilt and all that. What, $700 million worth of construction? What's the expected completion date of the football stadium?
Well, first of all, a few things here. You left out one program, that's Lipscomb Academy. Of course, Trent Guilford now at ULB, but they won. I mean, in the middle of all those schools, you had one that jumped up and was a powerhouse for a couple of years and won the state last year. Number two, I think sometimes in your backyard, it's a detriment. You go to the stadium, Vanderbilt fans are going to be outnumbered by Kentucky fans this week. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
That's going to be part of the issue. I think sometimes it's easier to get players away from town than it is in town, because in town they've been used to the same thing their whole lives. You go to the games, there's not a lot of excitement in terms of their fans in the stands, and who wants to play in your home stadium and get outnumbered. So I think it's actually sometimes harder for them to recruit their own backyard. To the question that's been posed in the chat here, the football stadium should be done by 2025. That end zone that is next to the hotel should be done by next year. That'll be the basketball building. So it'll be kind of half done. And that end zone that they blew up, that building that's going there should be finished by the 2025 season.
Yeah, because you've got First Bank as a sponsor. I work for First Bank in Memphis in the financial advisory team. Great place to work. And so they've put money in there. And that's, I don't know how big that commitment is, whatever, but, you know, it ain't cheap to get your name on the grass or whatever it is. But here's a question for you. And, you know, grass or sprint turf? The old debate was, you know, grass or AstroTurf. But this sprint turf, I was telling my wife, she goes, why do they have that stuff? I said, well, it saves on maintenance. And I think it's about $800,000 or $900,000 to put a field down, and it's crushed tire particles and whatever, space-aged polymers or whatever they put in there. But the maintenance is down, but it has about an 8, maybe 10-year shelf life. But, man, when you look at the injuries, and we had Dr. James Andrews, who's a well-known orthopedic surgeon, Auburn's team doctor, and also the Andrews Orthopedic Group works with Alabama in Gulf Breeze and Mountain Brook at St. Vincent's. I don't think he likes that turf, and he's at field level. And look at the number of players whose feet are caught in that sprint turf and tear their knees up. I don't know if that contributed to what happened to Nick Chubb the other night or whatever, but what are your thoughts on that? And you not only cover Vandy rivals, but you cover the Southeastern 14, soon to be 16.
Yeah, honestly, that's not a topic that's come up a lot, and I didn't see the Chubb play. I heard you really don't want to see it, but I mean, I watched Vanderbilt UNLV the other night, and Vanderbilt's left tackle got his ankle rolled by a guy behind him. I don't know if that injury happens on grass, if it's any different. Sometimes when you get hit from behind and your foot's locked in the ground to block, you're probably going to get hurt, whether it's on grass or turf. Maybe turf makes it tougher. I don't know. I mean, look, it does make field maintenance easier. You see it in baseball a lot. I think you're getting more games in baseball in the SEC because some teams have it. I know that's why Vanderbilt went to it, because you just get so much rain from February through April that I think it's made some games possible to be played that weren't before because of the drainage. So I think there's some benefits to it, but to be honest, Rob, I haven't dug in enough to give you an informed answer there.
Yeah, just curious. I mean, baseball, you're right. That's a great point. It works much better in baseball than it does, because football, there's just so much more cutting and moving, but you see a lot of injuries. But football's a tough game to begin with. All right, let's bounce around the SEC. I always like to start with you because I look to you, covering Kentucky. You cover all the schools. What about Liam Cohen? What about Devin Leary and Kentucky? They really haven't played a tough opponent, certainly not a Power 5 opponent the first 3 games, but give me a current report card, the good, the bad, and the ugly on the Kentucky Wildcats.
Yeah, I don't think you know yet. I like the pieces. Leary is one of the better quarterbacks in the league. I like their trio of wide receivers. I'd probably put them top 3 or 4 in the league in terms of what they've got there. Ray Davis was a piece that they really needed or getting a lot of use out of. He's had, 400 yards from scrimmage or something like that through 3 games. But look, the teams they played, Ball State, EKU, Akron, I don't know what you make of that. I think the expectation was that maybe instead of scoring 35 in some of those games, they should be scoring 52. It's hard to tell. I mean, it's early in the season, 1. And number 2, sometimes you play down to the competition. I don't know how much we learned about them Saturday against Vandy, but I still like the pieces they've got there. Now, offensive line was an issue last year and could be an issue again for them, but it's just they haven't played anybody of consequence to where you can make a definite opinion. I've got an opinion on the talent, but I think we need to see a little more than we just want for a bit.
Yeah, let's do this. I missed a break. We need to take a quick break. We're going to come right back. Chris Lee, Vandy Rivals, the Southeastern 14. Check out his show. And Chris, as always, if you could share our show and give us a retweet, we really appreciate that. But we'll be right back with more. Love the insight from Chris up there at Command Center in the Mid-State, Nashville.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.
All right, Rob Browne back with Chris Lee. And Chris, just looking around, besides Kentucky now, let's go to Tennessee. I put out last week, you got to be very careful of this on Twitter. People never forget. I put top 3 reasons why the Vols beat the Gators, and I followed that up with the top 3 reasons why the Gators beat the Vols. And, of course, I'm looking at social media the other night, and my web guy's going, stay on Twitter, get out there during these games, make stuff happen. Well, somebody posted on there what I had said about them, and this was at the end of the game when Florida won 29-16. And I replied, hey, I also put the 3 reasons why the Gators would win. But what I didn't expect to see was Joe Milton look so dazed and confused as the game went on. And he's got a strong arm. We all know that. But if you can't throw the short and intermediate pass, you're going to struggle. And give credit to Florida. They ran the ball well. And that second quarter was the most dominant second quarter I've seen out of Florida football in a long, long time.
Yeah, game flow was a big thing there. And Florida, I think I noticed this on your show last week, had been given it 47 snaps, which was the lowest number of defensive snaps in the season. And you know what they're going to want to do? They're going to want to try to run the ball with those 2 running backs. And Etienne had a phenomenal game. But Florida grabbed that early lead, was up big at half, and game flow just turned in Florida's direction. Tennessee runs the ball really well. When you're down big, that takes that away some. You mentioned Milton's accuracy issues. Hardly the only quarterback in the league that's having those right now. You see that maybe popping up as an issue at Alabama, the inability to complete the intermediate throw. But, yeah, that was one of those that the game flow went exactly the way Florida wanted it to. And once it got to that point, it was going to be tough for Tennessee to come back.
Yeah, and you look at Billy Napier, he's calling the plays. He's doing a lot. That's very difficult to do. Do you like that, or do you think he should go out and try to find somebody else to do it?
I'm not crazy about it, but if that's your comfort level and you trust yourself of what you know more, and that's you're able to do it without getting distracted, hey, if it works, then why fix it, right?
Yeah. Okay. Good point. And the Swamp Magic, and we had Allie Peak Wilbur on the show, who's part of the Buddy Martin show with Franz Beard and Ben Troop and all. And, she's got a lot of Gators. Husband played for the Champions in 06, brother in 08, father in the 80s, grandfather. And she gave a great perspective. And she said, Tennessee is going to have a hard time getting that swamp monkey off their back. 20 years since their last win. And Ben Troop was on with us yesterday. He talked about, he was there playing at Florida 2000 through 2003 when that happened. And you look at when they played, we won't back down at the end of the third quarter. We are the old boys of Florida. That place was rocking, 90,000 people in there. And it's a different kind of heat. It wasn't that hot temperature-wise, but the fact that the stadium, you go down into the ground, it's like a steam room down there. Tennessee should have been prepared for that. It was the same heat for both teams. But what concerns you most about Tennessee now after what you saw? People can say they were exposed or whatever, but they lost a couple of games last year badly at Georgia and at South Carolina, still went 11-2.
I still think they're pretty good, but they've got to solve those intermediate passing game issues. The problem with Milton is the 100-mile-an-hour fastballs when maybe you need a 70-mile-an-hour changeup in there somewhere. The accuracy issues. Now, look, they still run the ball really well, but you can't fall behind the way they did. That takes away part of your playbook a little bit. I think Tennessee's going to be fine. If it doesn't become a self-spiraling thing. In other words, if you don't get locker room dissension, if you don't get the things that cause teams to spiral downward as the pressure mounts. I think that Tennessee's defense is better this year. That's one thing that gets overlooked. I'm not out on Tennessee by any stretch yet, but you could see the game script on how to beat the Vols on display in Gainesville for sure.
Yeah, and the other thing is Brew McCoy. Tennessee lost some guys from last year. They've got some back this year. Is it a lack of talent? What is it? And is it the fact that they didn't have their starting center out there the whole game? Because Florida did. Kingsley Eagle was back. Your center is your quarterback of your offensive line. I don't think people realize, unless they understand football, how big a deal that was for Tennessee on the road.
Yeah, and I think Tennessee was also missing a right tackle, or at least a guy that's played a lot of right tackle for them. So it wasn't just that, but that's probably a fair point. The receivers, Rob, to be honest, I've sort of viewed Tennessee's guys since Heupel has been there as fungible. In other words, look, they had Tillman a couple years ago, had that big year in 2021, didn't do much last year because of injury. Jalen Hyatt steps up, wins the Biletnikoff Award. He was not as big a factor the previous years. It's kind of like, okay, one guy steps out, another guy steps in. You saw a bunch of kids on that team last year had big moments. Squirrel White had some. Brew McCoy had some. They bring in the Thornton kid from Oregon. I don't know, maybe I've undersold Jalen Hyatt, maybe against the backdrop of all those other guys. He was more special than we thought. It just feels like a system where you can get guys, and they've got guys who can run, and because they play so fast, they're hard to stop. But that's fair. Maybe they miss Jalen Hyatt more than we thought. I don't know.
Yeah. And a question here. Since when is it illegal for the band to play after a game? I'm sure you're familiar with Jackson Olin down in Birmingham and Minor High School. The bands like to play what they call the fifth quarter after the game. Did you see this story where the police had to come in there and they couldn't get them to stop? And apparently they started tasing people and people got arrested.
Oh, man.
And yeah, that was down at in Birmingham last weekend. But the band leader was tased, and I was listening. I watched it, and I mean, my God, they're playing after a game. They were turning the lights off to try to get the people to leave. Like when you're trying late at night. But that's that's ridiculous. I mean, there's the band playing after the game is enjoyable. I like it.
Yeah. No, I hadn't seen that. This time of year, I'm pretty locked into what I cover and what my kids are doing, and if it's outside of that, unless it's a nuke somewhere, I may not notice. But that seems a little much.
Yeah, seems a little excessive, whatever, for sure.
But I shouldn't laugh. I mean, that's no serious business. But yeah.
Yeah, it is. And high school bands or high school football. Do you get to cover as much high school football as you do college?
I've done it in the past, a year or two there, but I'm not right now. Fridays are usually my night with my family. We will go. Yeah. There's a high school a half mile from our house. We'll go watch them a little bit, but other than that, no, I'm just not. I need a break because I'm going to be full tilt on Saturdays from 11 to whenever the last game ends.
Yeah, and it's funny, Dudley Dawson was on with us in that first hour and change at hogville.net. And one of the, Fearless Fridays, his high school coverage on his website, he's trying to hit the more than 200 plus high schools in the state of Arkansas, get to every one of them and meet with the coaches, go to a practice, go to a game or whatever. I think he's 75 or 80 schools into it. He started this, in the last couple of years. But, the SEC, the narrative, the league is down. Well, if you're going to say that, you got to quantify your statements with fact. I'm going to throw this at you, Chris, because you're very cerebral there in your studio. I love your studio with all the background. And I wish every guest had a studio like yours for background, and it looks cool. But the lack of elite quarterback play, to me, seems obvious at every school in the conference. looked completely lost with Dan Enos. And I think Enos is a hell of a quarterback coach. I'm not sure about a play caller, what I've seen so far, but would you agree that lack of elite quarterback play? But when you look at two future members of the SEC, you have to ask this question. Quinn Ewers and Dylan Gabriel at Oklahoma, would you consider them elite quarterbacks?
I mean, I haven't seen Gabriel play this year. I did, of course, see Texas and Alabama, and Ewers looks elite. Of course, we know the story about last year too, and how he was playing until he got hurt and how that game changed. But Rob, I'll go one step further. I do think it's maybe a little bit of a quarterback issue, but let's look at offensive lines. And I'm just going to look to my right so I don't miss a team. Teams where you've heard offensive line stuff pop up, and there's going to be more than this, but you've heard complaints at Georgia. You've heard complaints a little bit at Kentucky. South Carolina, 9 sacks in the opener. We talked about Tennessee. Vanderbilt's has been atrocious. Alabama's has been poor. Arkansas, Sam Pittman, offensive line coach. A couple of all SEC types. They've had offensive line issues. LSU's had offensive line issues.
Yeah.
I mean, there may be more than that, but as a minimum, look, when you don't have time to throw and you can't trust the guys in front of you, I have to think that's part of it too.
Yeah. Lack of offensive linemen. That seems like it's coming from these 7-on-7 skill camps where the linemen are kind of put over to the side. And, are we having fewer people come into the country to keep the height up? I mean, we got a lot of big people in this country. I mean, go to Walmart, you'll see them riding around on scooters. But athletically, when you get a 330-pound kid out of high school, I don't know how good that is. You'd rather get them at 270 or 280 and then build that 40 pounds in the weight room and in the wellness kitchen or whatever they've got like that. But several things also. Mississippi State, again, you cover the Southeastern 14. Will Rogers, last 2 weekends, I think he's had the worst games in his career since he was a middle schooler at Rankin High School or Rankin Middle School down outside of Jackson, Mississippi. And here's my reason for asking this. In the 3 years Zach Arnett was there with Mike Leach in the air raid offense, his defense did a pretty good job of containment. Mm-hmm. They helped them win 9 games last year. I understand wanting to have your own identity, but it's kind of like if you bought a business, 125-year-old business named Browne, Lee, and Wolfowitz, and your last name was Finkelstein. As my dad told me one time, boy, you can't make up 125 years of equity. Why change it? Why? And I like Zach Arnett. I love his enthusiasm. I think he's an excellent coach out of Albuquerque, but it's awful watching. It's like trying to take a Labrador retriever and make him a pointer.
Yeah.
It's difficult to watch.
Well, look, Mike Leach ran a unique offensive system. And here's the thing, Rob, when you make that decision to hire him as coach, you're going to have to unwind that someday, right? Unless you bring in another air raid guy. And so as critical as we've been of what they've done there, and I'm not sure it's all unfair, you got a little bit of an issue of somebody at some point was going to have to deal with this, where they're going to have to change the offense. Now, I don't know if now was the time. I thought bringing in Mike Wright was kind of curious because he didn't fit that kind of system at all. Maybe now we know more why. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe that's one of those things. And I guess you've got to start building the system you want, recruiting to that. And maybe you could say, well, if you leave it the same for a couple of years, you're not getting the players in to run the system that you want to run 2, 3, 4 years down the road. So I don't know. I feel a little badly for Zach Arnett and all this, that unless you're going to run that exact same system, at some point it's going to have to change a little bit how you do things. And so that was always going to be something they're going to face at some point, but certainly it's not going well.
Yeah, and it is very frustrating. We had James Shimon on, one of our listeners down Saturday morning on the round table live from the junction there in Starkville, and they were jacked up before that game. And, man, it was over quickly. I mean, LSU came in, and I always like to say when I'm picking these games, the visiting team, especially if they got a lot of talent like LSU does, has the momentum. You can take the crowd out of the game in the first quarter, and some of those people then just say, I'm not even going in to watch that. I mean, it's just that was ugly across the board. Mississippi State only had 201 yards of total offense. I think with 8 minutes left in the game, they had 123 yards of total offense.
Yeah.
Give credit to LSU.
At one point, LSU had 24 points and State had 7 yards. And if you looked at that stadium by the end of the game, I think one end was a little more full than the other. But, man, it was sparsely attended by games in. I'm not casting judgment on the folks of Starkville. If I'd been a season ticket holder in those shoes, I probably would have been out too if for a hot day. And I don't know what the weather was like there, but it was not a pretty picture by game's end.
Yeah, it was rough. But last thing, as far as the SEC goes, again, I talked about Quinn Ewers and Dylan Gabriel, the quarterbacks at Texas and Oklahoma, respectively. They're better quarterbacks than anybody the SEC has right now. So let's talk about the learning curve. I mean, are you following Texas and OU right now in advance of them coming into the league in July?
A little bit. I've got enough right now to do the 14 that I've got, and kind of cover a beat on top of that. So something's got to give at some point. But that's something I am going to ramp up as we get closer to the end of the year, and certainly if both these teams end up playoff contenders. But no, I don't have my eyes on things on those programs like I will a year from now.
Yeah. I mean, the SEC right now, I don't know if the league is down, but it's certainly the lack of elite quarterback play. And I watch this Jalen Milroe thing at Alabama.
Yeah.
The chemistry, the atmosphere in the locker room, in practice or whatever, something isn't right. You don't go down there. Jerry Kirby, one of our team members on Sidelines up in Clarksville, crunches these numbers. And last week, he texted me a week ago, Monday night, on the way back from Orange Beach. He said, Rob, watch out for South Florida against Alabama. Alex Golish, whatever, offensive coordinator for Josh Heupel, is now the head coach down there. They also got a $300 million check coming their way to do improvements on their stadium for the South Florida Bulls. But you don't telegraph to the other team, we're using this as a scrimmage to check out these other quarterbacks. To me, I always listen to what the Alabama guys like Rodney Orr and Gary Harris, Tighter Insider TV, said. If they had a better quarterback, they'd have played him. I think Jalen Milroe, but I'm not sure mentally, you can't pout and act that way. I know on TV he did the right things, but I think there's some stuff. I think Nick Saban is losing his mind because he's got these kids that are entitled. Yeah, there's a lot of winning tradition at Alabama, but you got to work for it. Anything worth having in life, we all know it's worth working for. I'm not sure everybody on that team is as committed as Coach Nick Saban is, because he is the GOAT, no doubt.
Yeah, Rob, we didn't talk off air. You may have heard some of the same things I've heard. I share some of those concerns. We had Drew DeArmond on from Huntsville Radio.
Yeah,
who's really dialed into that program.
Oh,
and a friend of mine. And Drew came out yesterday and basically said that what he thought happened with Milroe was a de facto suspension. And I think he's right. I don't think they were going to play Jalen Milroe in that game no matter what. Part of it would be some of the stuff that you touched on with the reaction to things and not having a good week beyond that. So I think that it was more than just, hey, he didn't throw the intermediate ball very well, didn't see some defenders. I think there was more to things, and keeping that locker room together may be a little bit of a challenge for Nick Saban going forward, and that's not the way you want to start a season for sure.
Yeah, and because Nick Saban has not lost it. I just think not having Bo Davis as defensive line coach, look what Bo is doing with Texas's defensive line. It is amazing.
Yeah.
And he is a great coach and a great recruiter. I think Kevin Steele will fix this thing. Alabama, you have everything in the world going for you. That quarterback situation, and then the offensive line, they've got work to do. There's a lot to go. Look, we've run out of time. Most often we see the face of Christ and least among us. We live in the greatest country in the history of the world. We have the best guests, the best sponsors, the best viewers and listeners out there. Do us a favor, Chris, let people know how they can keep up with you. And if you would, please share the show, give us a retweet. We really appreciate it. Love having you on, and I think you take your craft seriously, and we benefit from it.
Well, thank you. Already did make a retweet there, so hope people can catch the replay later if they haven't. I cover, of course, Vanderbilt at vandysports.com, but probably bigger interest to your audience. Southeastern 14, it's a YouTube channel in which we cover baseball, basketball, football year-round. We do a daily show from 11 to noon Central, so as soon as I hop off with you, I'll get ready for that. We're going to have Neil McCready on, who covers Ole Miss and is outstanding at it, to talk about this game this coming weekend and whatever's going on with the Rebels and Lane Kiffin's comments and things like that. So we're looking forward to doing that today. And again, thank you for having me here.
Absolutely. And Drew DeArmond and Wes Neighbors and the folks down there in Huntsville do a phenomenal job of covering Alabama, the SEC, and everything. But that's what I love about having you on here. Get it from the source. Folks, have a great day. We'll be back tomorrow morning. Got a great show kicking off with Connor O'Gara tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Central. We are out of here.